The wrench slipped from Maya Rodriguez's oil-slicked fingers as the sound hit her, deep, rhythmic, growing louder by the second. She lay beneath the Ford pickup, staring up at rusted brake lines and exhaust pipes, when the first vibrations shook the concrete floor of her garage. The sound wasn't traffic. It wasn't a truck backfiring or construction equipment from the highway project 3 miles south. This was something else entirely. The distinctive whop 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 of rotor blades, cutting through mountain air. Maya rolled out from under the truck, wiping her hands on coveralls that had seen better years. Through the open bay door, she caught sight of something that made her breath catch. A Black Hawk helicopter hung in the sky directly above her garage, close enough that she could see the helmeted figures in its windows. The rotor wash hit like a sudden storm. Tools scattered across her workbench, papers flew in spirals, and dust swirled up from every corner of the shop. The overhead fluorescents swayed on their chains, casting moving shadows across walls. Lined with spare parts and forgotten projects, neighbors emerged from houses along Maple Street, shading their eyes against the afternoon sun. Mrs. Patterson from next door stood in her garden, trowel forgotten in her grip. Tom Chen paused mid-stride as he walked his dog, the animal cowering against his legs. Maya stepped outside, one hand raised to block the debris kicked up by the rotors. The Black Hawk held position with military precision, neither advancing nor retreating. Through the aircraft's windows, she could see figures in combat gear, studying the scene below, studying her. This wasn't a training exercise or medical evacuation. This was deliberate, targeted, personal. The realization hit her like cold water. They were looking for her. 3 weeks ago, Maya's biggest worry had been the overdue notice from the electric company. Rodriguez Auto Repair occupied a converted gas station on the edge of Clearwater, Colorado. Population 2,147 and shrinking. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, except when it came to Maya. She'd inherited the garage from her uncle after his heart attack 2 years prior, along with his debts and his reputation for honest work. The locals had accepted her competence grudgingly, the way small towns accepted any change that couldn't be avoided. Girl thinks she can handle a transmission. Old Bill Garrett had muttered loud enough for her to hear. We'll see how long that lasts. Maya had proven herself one repair at a time, but respect came slowly in a place where gender mattered more than skill. Customers still asked when the real mechanic would be available. Insurance salesmen called her honey and quoted prices they'd never offer a man. She worked 12-hour days to stay afloat, taking jobs others wouldn't touch. The rusted-out pickups, the engines that had been neglected past reason, the vehicles whose owners counted every dollar twice before spending it. Her hands carried permanent stains from motor oil and brake fluid, badges of competence that remained invisible to those who mattered. The bills arrived with clockwork regularity. Rent, utilities, parts suppliers, the loan she'd signed to keep the doors open. Maya paid what she could and deferred the rest, always one crisis away from closing permanently. She'd learned to keep her head down, to let her work speak louder than her words. In a town where standing out meant becoming a target, invisibility was survival. The only luxury in her sparse apartment above the garage was a shadow box hanging on the living room wall. Her father's military memorabilia, arranged behind dusty glass, ribbons she couldn't identify, medals with names like Bronze Star and Combat Infantry Badge, and in the center, a unit patch she'd never seen him wear. Staff Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez had returned from Afghanistan, different quieter, more careful with his words. He'd deflected Maya's questions about his service with the same gentle firmness he'd used to enforce curfews. Some things follow you, whether you want them to or not, Mija, he'd said once, when she'd pressed him about the nightmares that woke him gasping. Better to leave some doors closed. She'd found letters after his funeral, written in careful script from men with names like Thompson and Jackson and Martinez. They thanked him for things they couldn't specify, referenced operations that didn't appear in any official record Maya could locate. One envelope, never opened, bore the return address of U.S. Army Special Operations Command. Maya had held it to the light, but whatever secrets it contained had died with him. The unit patch in the shadow box was the only clue. A black eagle clutching lightning bolts against a red background, with text too faded to read clearly. Maya had tried researching it online, but the searches returned only fragments and speculation. Sometimes she caught herself wondering if the man who taught her to change spark plugs was the same person who'd carried whatever weight those ribbons represented. Back on Maple Street, the Black Hawk maintained its position with mechanical patience. Maya felt exposed under its electronic gaze, as if infrared cameras were cataloging her vital signs and facial features. The rotor wash had settled into a steady hurricane that made normal thought impossible. She retreated into the garage, but even there the sound penetrated, deep, insistent, military. Through the windows, she watched her neighbors gathering in small groups, pointing and speculating. Cell phones emerged, capturing video that would be uploaded before the helicopter departed. In 30 minutes, half the county would know about the military aircraft hovering over Rodriguez Auto Repair. Maya checked her watch. 3:47 p.m. The helicopter had been overhead for 6 minutes and showed no signs of leaving. A patrol car arrived with lights, but no siren. Sheriff Department markings clear on its doors. Deputy Morrison climbed out, hand resting on his radio, eyes fixed on the aircraft. Above, even he looked confused. This wasn't standard protocol for anything he'd trained for. The psychological pressure built like water behind a dam. Maya's hands shook as she tried to focus on the pickup's transmission, but every fiber in her body remained tuned to the sound overhead. The message was clear without being spoken. We see you. We know where you are. We can reach you anytime we choose. At 4:03 p.m., the Black Hawk banked left and disappeared over the ridgeline, leaving behind silence that felt heavier than the noise had been. The question started before Maya had even swept the debris from her garage floor. Deputy Morrison knocked first, his inquiry polite but probing. Everything all right here, Maya? Any reason you can think of why a military helicopter would take such an interest? She could only shake her head, honestly mystified. By evening, the phone calls began. Childhood friends suddenly interested in reconnecting. Reporters from the county paper asking about her military connections. Curiosity seekers who'd driven over from neighboring towns to see where it had happened. Tom Chen stopped by after dark, ostensibly to check on her well-being, but really to satisfy his own curiosity. That was Army Special Operations, he said, recognition clear in his voice. He'd done 2 tours in Iraq, carried enough experience to identify equipment and purpose. They don't fly solo missions for training exercises. The implications hung in the air between them, like smoke. Maya closed the garage early Wednesday and Thursday, unable to concentrate with strangers driving slowly past, craning their necks to peer inside. The local diner buzzed with theories that grew more elaborate with each retelling. Heard she's got cartel connections, whispered one voice. My cousin thinks she's witness protection. came another. Maybe she's military herself, undercover or something. The speculation followed her to the grocery store, the post office, the bank where she deposited checks from the few customers still willing to bring their vehicles by. Clearwater had always been a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. But now, Maya had become the business everyone wanted to know. Old Bill Garrett cornered her at the hardware store Friday morning, his suspicion obvious. 23 years I've lived here. Never seen anything like that. Girl like you doesn't attract that kind of attention by accident. The accusation stung, because Maya couldn't defend against it. She had no answers, no explanations that would satisfy the growing unease in her neighbor's eyes. Even Mrs. Patterson, who'd always been kind, now watched from her kitchen window with expressions Maya couldn't read. The comfortable anonymity she'd cultivated was gone, replaced by a spotlight that made her skin crawl with unwanted attention. Friday evening brought another shift change at the sheriff's department, and with it, increased patrols past her garage. Maya began to wonder if the attention was protective or investigative. Saturday morning, Maya found the envelope slipped under her garage door, positioned precisely in the center where she couldn't miss it. No postmark, no return address, just her name written in block letters across cream-colored paper. Inside, a single sentence in the same careful script. Your father saved us. We don't forget. Maya read the words 3 times, her coffee growing cold in her shaking hands. The message rewrote everything. The helicopter's presence, the careful observation, the deliberate display of military power over a civilian target. They hadn't been hunting her. They'd been saluting her. The realization struck with the force of revelation. Carlos Rodriguez hadn't just been career military. He'd been something else entirely, operating in shadows that left no official trace, but created debts that outlasted death itself. The unit patch in her shadow box took on new significance, no longer a relic, but a recognition symbol. The unopened letter from Special Operations Command suddenly seemed less like correspondence and more like continued communication with someone who'd never truly left the service. Maya understood now why her father had been so careful with his words, why certain subjects had remained forever off limits. He'd carried secrets that weren't his to share, protecting her from attention she'd inherited. Without understanding its weight, the Black Hawk hadn't been intimidation. It had been acknowledgement, a message delivered by people who understood that some debts transcended bureaucracy and official channels. Monday brought a return to routine that felt anything but normal. Maya rolled under the Ford pickup, trying to lose herself in the familiar rhythms of diagnostics and repair, but every sound from outside made her pause. Delivery trucks, low-flying aircraft, even motorcycles triggered hyper-awareness she couldn't shake. The phone rang less frequently now. Some customers had decided Rodriguez Auto Repair carried too much baggage for their comfort. Others, intrigued by the mystery, brought their vehicles specifically to satisfy their curiosity about the woman who commanded military attention. Maya found herself working with new precision, as if unseen eyes might be evaluating her performance. Each repair carried the weight of her father's legacy, the echo of missions she'd never know about, but somehow represented. The shadow box on her wall had become a shrine to questions she'd never be able to ask. But the answers, she realized, lived in the work itself. The steady competence, the quiet reliability, the willingness to fix what others had given up on. As afternoon faded toward evening, Maya caught herself listening for rotor blades in every distant sound. The Black Hawk was gone, but its presence lingered like an imprint on the air itself. She wiped her hands on a clean rag and stepped outside, scanning the empty sky with eyes that now understood the difference between coincidence and intention. Somewhere out there, people who'd served with Carlos Rodriguez continued their own missions, carrying forward the bonds forged in places that didn't officially exist. Maya had inherited more than a garage and its debts. She'd inherited a legacy written in disappearing ink, acknowledged by those who remembered what others were never meant to know. The sound of distant rotors echoed faintly from the direction of the ridgeline, making her pause with tools halfway to the workbench. Real or imagined, the sound carried a message that would follow her whether she wanted it to or not. Her father had been right about some things following you, but he'd never mentioned that sometimes. They followed you to protect what couldn't be protected any other way.